My name is Jeff Morgan, and I'd like to continue with part 3 of a series entitled Whose Fault is No Fault Divorce? The story behind America's most enduring oxymoron. This came from an article written by Ryan McPherson. In the first 2 videos, I talked about how no-fault divorce, unilateral, forced, no-fault divorce, divorce on demand, easy divorce, was a feature of Vladimir Lenin when the Bolsheviks came to power. One of the first things he did was to institute unilateral, forced, no-fault divorce because his stated aim was to destroy the family. Karl Marx believed that the family was actually an institution from the bourgeois society and that needed to be destroyed. The family was considered an effective weapon against the revolution, so one of the first things Vladimir Lenin did was to try to destroy the family, and one of the ways he did it was to institute unilateral divorce on demand. After that, I also talked a little bit about the idea that there were progressive attorneys, liberal attorneys, divorce attorneys, and other people like that, legislators who wanted to see no-fault divorce, unilateral no-fault divorce implemented in America out of selfish purposes. Divorce attorneys, because they were going to make a ton of money off of this, and the one politician who actually got Ronald Reagan to sign his bill because he had a personal interest. He wanted to go through a divorce his wife, and keep all of his assets. So he lied directly to Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan signed the bill into law. By 1980, there were about 37 out of 50 states that had adopted some form of no-fault divorce. Ronald Reagan did say that it was one of his biggest regrets from public office. So there is another group of people that were largely responsible to help the American society become amenable to the idea of unilateral forced no-fault divorce, and that is the liberal theologians. In this article that Ryan McPherson wrote, he focused primarily on the Lutheran denomination to show how things changed and how the so-called Christian church started to adapt to American life. Instead of remaining faithful to the scripture, they decided to be faithful to culture. Now, at the beginning of the century, both liberal and conservative theologians condemned divorce. In general, all divorce was to be condemned, and wherever possible, it was to be avoided. The thought was as well that as impermissible as divorce was, remarriage after divorce was even less permissible. It was something that should not be done. Pastors were actually prohibited from performing a second marriage for somebody, unless there was one exception in which the pastor could do so if the pastor was convinced that the individual that he was marrying was actually the innocent party of the divorce. Now, again, the liberal theologians are actually making justifications now for divorce. They've started to expand the reasons that divorce is acceptable. And by 1956, they started talking about being loving and kind to a person. That a person who went through a divorce, even if he was at fault for the divorce or she caused the divorce, that we needed to be loving and kind toward that person, a little bit less judgmental, and after appropriate pastoral counseling and evidence of a Christian faith, that person would be allowed to remarry. So within the space of about 20-25 years, you went from a position where the pastor could not marry a person who had been divorced unless he was convinced that the person he was marrying was the innocent party in the divorce, to now getting to the position where the pastor can remarry anybody, and really now we need to be less judgmental toward that person. We need to show Christian love and kindness, and if that person goes through appropriate pastoral counseling and gives evidence of his or her faith, that person can be remarried. The position statement even called for uniform and constructive marriage and divorce laws. So now here's the Lutheran Church saying that we need to have uniform and constructive marriage and divorce laws that would avoid an adversary litigation and would permit smoother adjustment once a civil dissolution seemed inevitable. So the church originally was anti-divorce. You can't divorce. We condemn divorce in general in almost every situation. So now we have to have a position statement in which we are calling for more civil marriage and divorce laws that permit a smoother adjustment once a civil dissolution of marriage seemed inevitable. By 1962, the United Lutheran Church of America merged with several other Lutheran bodies to form the Lutheran Church in America, And 2 years later, this new body adopted language identical to the previous statement. And they again called for a less adversarial approach to the civil dissolution of marriage. By 1967, a committee seeking to stimulate thought and discussion about the topic of divorce dared to envision that there should be divorce without fault finding. There should be, and I guess this is the liberal wing of the Lutheran Church, there should be no fault divorce. We should be able to have divorce without any fault whatsoever. And again, this is a church. This is a church representing supposedly the position of Scripture, but the liberal theologians are saying, no, we need to have a new type of divorce in America. A divorce that it just didn't work out. Nobody's at fault. The marriage just dissolved on its own. Divorce proceedings pit two people against each other as adversaries, each having to destroy the other person in order to resolve a problem. Well, the problem may be that one person is beating his or her spouse, and the other person is being very unfaithful to his or her spouse. This is considered a problem. And it's not looked at upon as that person is the problem, the person needs to repent. No, there is a problem that we somehow just need to resolve. The present divorce proceedings, which make one party innocent and the other party guilty, are at variance with the insights of Christian ethics. So now you get to the place where the Lutheran Church is saying, well, you know what, divorce, we have a new Christian ethic right now. We can't blame the guilty party for acting in an ungodly manner. We have to somehow find a way that there's really no fault to be placed here. And by 1970, the Lutheran Church was ready to take official action. The convention actually adopted the position that divorce was not intrinsically sinful and at times may even be morally superior to preserving the marriage. So it's very interesting because here is the Lutheran Church being led by liberal theologians that is now taking a position completely against what God says in the Old Testament. God says, I hate divorce. I detest divorce. I can't stand divorce. The reason I'm not accepting your offerings and prayers is because you have divorced the partner of your youth. And the Lutheran Church is coming with its liberal theologians who are now saying, divorce is not always intrinsically sinful, and at times it may even be morally superior to preserving a marriage. So what has happened? The church has completely reversed its position. It used to be no divorce for almost any reason whatsoever, and if you're divorced and you're the one who causes the divorce, you're the guilty party, no remarriage for you. No pastor was allowed to remarry you. Now we come to the 1970s and divorce is really not such a bad thing. Sometimes it's probably even morally superior than keeping a marriage together. And by the way, don't blame anybody if they cause a divorce. No. This is the age of no fault divorce. I guess that means no fault before God. No sin whatsoever occurred. So it was pretty amazing because the Lutheran position actually corresponded with the civil position of no-fault divorce that was being forced upon society at that time. In 1969, California became the first state to actually officially adopt no-fault divorce as the new standard. And once again, lest there be any confusion, no-fault divorce originated under Lenin in Bolshevik Russia. His intended goal was to destroy the family. That's what it was. The family was the bourgeois institution that needed to be destroyed so that the communist revolution, the godless communist revolution, could continue and liberate people. And this has now become the official position of the state of California, and it appears that it has now become the official position of the Lutheran Church. The Lutheran Church is supposed to be standing up for God, not embracing godless ideology. So it went even further than that, though. By 1982, there was a more moderate church body, the American Lutheran Church, and what they have said is this: each party generally bears some responsibility. So it's not no-fault divorce anymore. Now it's shared responsibility to divorce. It really wasn't that person's fault that he left his wife, and it really wasn't that person's fault that she was cheating on her husband. No, there's actually a shared responsibility here. Maybe she was cheating on her husband because he was just so intolerable. Maybe he abandoned his wife and ran off with somebody else because His wife was too old, started to get droopy skin, whatever the case may be. The things that we would consider abhorrent now become justified. Each party now bears some responsibility. And how do we fix this thing? Well, we just need to have some pastoral guidance. With some pastoral guidance, each of the parties could recognize a responsible choice. So now we have a responsible choice, and the responsible choice favors the lesser of several evils. I mean, at least it's still considered an evil, I guess, but the responsible party will choose the lesser of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 evils. We're going to be choosing evil. We're not choosing good. We're going to choose the lesser of the 2 evils. That is now the position of the church. As time goes on, by 2009, the Lutheran body had adopted a social statement concerning human sexuality. And even though it expressed that there was an aspiration for marriage to be lifelong and monogamous, I mean, that's the way God intended it. I'm glad that they haven't completely dumped that to the side. So we have this aspiration that marriage should be lifelong and monogamous. The resolution avoided any negative judgment concerning adultery or desertion, and extended to all persons the freedom to marry someone new. Completely changed their position from the turn of the century. And in the drafting of this document, the proposed amendment to define marriage as a lifelong normative commitment received significant support, but fell short of the required majority. So liberal theologians actually helped to make no-fault divorce acceptable in the church. In the next video, I'm going to talk more about whose fault is no-fault divorce, and this is going to be addressed to conservative Christians because you too had a role in making no-fault unilateral forced divorce acceptable to the American society. You too bear the blame. Thank you.